everyone, and welcome to Philly Talks Trash, a virtual series on waste. My name is Rocky, and I'll be your host this evening. Tonight's event was organized in collaboration with Philadelphia Neighborhood Networks and the Plastic Reduction Task Force of Weaver's Way Co-op. Tonight's program will focus on Philadelphia's trash and recycling crisis. Now, the title of our program may seem very interesting to you. It's not often that you see the words recycling and crisis conflated. You may be asking yourself this question, why is this so? And how is it possible that recycling can be deemed a crisis? I'm here to tell you that you are in the right place. Tonight, you will be learning from a combination of professionals in this field, journalists, and business leaders who are experts and who are here to answer your questions along the way. Can you move to the next slide, please, Elaine? So there's a saying in the sustainability and zero waste movement, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, and it's to act locally and think globally. What this statement means is our actions as a locality, a community, have a rippling effect across the state, across the nation, and ultimately across the globe. The first step, in my opinion, in implementing any change is to first identify the problem and inform ourselves on how to solve it. And that's what you all are doing here tonight, simply by being here. So thank you. Can you move to the next slide, please, Elaine? Many of you are probably joining us from our previous series. This is the third part in a 7-part series that we are holding on waste. Our next event will occur on April 21st. It's entitled Growing Circular Reuse Models in Food Service and Grocery. Please stick around to the end of our presentation, and we'll discuss more in detail who will be speaking at this next event. Elaine, can you move to the next slide, please? So here's our agenda so you can follow along with us. Our speakers tonight include Maurice Sampson, the Director of Clean Water Action of Eastern Pennsylvania, Julie Hancher, the co-founder and editor of Green Philly, and we'll then move on to our 3 panelists, Evan Abel, the head of service design at The Rounds, Tim Bennett, the founder of Bennett Compost, and Matthew Seifried, the co-founder of Rabbit Recycling. We'll then follow up with a discussion and a Q&A. You might have questions while the speakers are in conversation. You might have questions while the panelists are speaking more about their organization. You might have questions right now. You might be asking yourself, Rocky, where did you get that fabulous sweater? And I'm here to tell you, you can direct them on the top right corner of your screen. You'll hit more, and there's a chat setting there. You can send all those questions to Hillary Baum or Kim Paymaster directly. If you don't feel comfortable sharing the question out in the open, just send it directly to them. I have the pleasure of introducing someone who I feel very lucky to be speaking with today. Kyle J. Lewis is our guest speaker tonight, and they wanted to share a few words with you guys before we officially started our program. Kyle J. Lewis is the City of Philadelphia's Recycling Program Director. Kyle, thank you for being here, and please take the floor.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate a couple of minutes to say good evening to everybody, and thank you again to everybody who organized this event. You can imagine that my email kind of blew up with not only the inbox from the coordinators, but from others when they saw the title. And so I wanted to come and just share with you that in Philadelphia, the market for recycling is actually doing pretty well. We started our contract with Waste Management in in April of 2019. We were paying a processing rate of around $100 a ton. Currently, we're paying a rate of around $58 a ton. And so the markets are doing well. Plastics are doing considerably better because the kind of unfortunate juxtaposition, right, is that when the petroleum market goes up, plastics, the value of recycled plastics goes up because that way, virgin materials are made from petroleum products. And so the value of recycled plastics go up. And so plastics are doing well. Aluminum is doing exceedingly well. The price went up $500 within a month. It's about $1,700 a ton. And so the market itself is doing well. And so we want to encourage everybody to continue to recycle in Philadelphia, keep providing that feedstock and keep providing those feedstock materials, keep supporting the 60,000 jobs in Pennsylvania that are directly associated with recycling and the 110,000 jobs in Pennsylvania that are indirectly associated. Sorry, a phone call. Sorry about that. One of the things that I have heard from different people, and I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation, but I have heard the narrative that recycling is broken. And I would say that recycling is no more broken than an airline that cancels flights for a day or two. Is it majorly inconvenient? Absolutely. But has the system been strained? Yes, it has. But we are experiencing consistent dual collections around the city. So again, I want to encourage everybody, to reduce, reuse, and recycle, because those three combined are what's going to get us to a more sustainable place. When I hear the narrative of the broken recycling system, it makes me wonder, what is the call to action for the public with that, right? And my job is to make sure that the public call to action is one of action and not apathy. And so, I have certainly, again, acknowledged that the system has been strained, but we want to encourage everybody again to provide that feedstock, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And so please keep recycling Philadelphia. The market's doing very well. And, the recycling program is certainly in full, robust action.
Thank you, Kyle. That was very informative. Something that you mentioned is that you've been using your voice to encourage Philadelphia to keep recycling despite the challenges brought on by the pandemic. I would like everyone to know that Kyle is not formally a speaker here tonight, but if there's enough time at the end of our presentation, we can direct some questions towards Kyle. Thank you again. Elaine, can you move to the next slide, please? Our next principal speaker is Mr. Maurice Sampson. Maurice Sampson's environmental career spans over 50 years. He served among the nation's first recycling coordinators for Newark, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. Since 2016, Maurice has also served as the Eastern PA Director for Clean Water Action. In that role, he drafted the bill and facilitated political support leading to the passage of Philly's plastic bag ban. Maurice, thank you for being here tonight.
Maurice, I don't think I can hear you, Maurice.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go.
There we
Good
are.
evening, everybody. As I was starting to say before, I've got a scant 7 minutes to give my comments. Anybody who knows me may be here only to see if that is real or not. So I am going to get right into it. What I'm going to give you is a chronological history of what has happened, with regards to waste management in Philadelphia. The slides are going to have a lot more information I'm going to offer you, but they will be available if you want to look at them in more detail. With that said, let me share my screen. And let's see, get that going. Okay, can we see it, Rocky? Give me a thumbs up, please. Excellent. All right, so here we go. First, trash collection is first in the country by no other than Benjamin Franklin, who wrote the first contracts for sweeping and rubbish collection. In 1921, we formally began the city's collection programs in terms of curbside collection of trash. Notably, 2 years after the last pandemic we had, which was the Spanish flu in 2018. Refuse collection in those days included ash from coal-burning furnaces, rubbish, and street sweepings. Rags, grease, and metals were all collected privately. Quite frankly, in 1921, there was virtually no commercial generated waste. In 1924 and 1927, the city's first incinerators were built, one at Harrogate in Frankfurt, the other in Bartram. That facility in Bartram still stands in Southwest Philly. It took 20 years. People in Philly did not use the collection program they had. They continued to do what they were doing. And the Sanitation Police unit was formed, and they started issuing violations. In 1945, they gave out over 2,200 summonses, and people started putting their trash out correctly. In 1949, the last of 150 dumps in city limits closed. We've had a scarcity of dumps in 1924, 1930, 1944, and again reported in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. In effect, trash has always been a problem. The most effective trash collection plan ever made was written in 1949 when the consultants suggested, and what we did was to send all of our trash to the lowlands and swamps in New Jersey. In 1950 to 1960, there were more incinerators built. The coal burning at home was phased out for oil and gas furnaces. The amount of consumer goods greatly increased in that period of time. So we need more incinerators. And in 1950, we built one in South Philly. In 1956, we built one right at Delaware and Spring Gardens Avenue. And also in 1960, they built the Northwest incinerator. The first federal laws were written in 1965. The legislation called for scrubbers on the incinerators in Philadelphia, upgraded and then closed all of its incinerators in the early 1980s. The real crisis really began in the late 70s. At that point in time, pretty much everybody was sending their trash to New Jersey, and New Jersey said enough, and they made a plan to get rid of everybody. And they kicked Philadelphia out. At that point in time, there was a court case, went all to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court then ruled that trash was commerce. States are not to regulate interstate commerce, so that effectively let Philadelphia back in, unless, of course, New Jersey owned all the landfills. Between 1974 and 84, New Jersey bought all of the landfills, and Philadelphia was kicked out in 1984. That directly led to my hiring here in 1985, as we were in a real crisis. We were one of the few big cities in the country that did not own its own landfills. So we had no place to send all of our trash. And it went 300, 400, 500 miles away. And every place it went, it created controversy and it created recycling wherever our trash went. And in 1987, Mayor Good had proposed to build an incinerator. That failed, but at the same time, the mandatory recycling was adopted. It was the first city and mandated recycling in the country was in Philadelphia. We were in big trouble. And then a brand new national waste company came to the city and said, listen, we'll give you a contract for 5 years. And that was Waste Management. And that effectively ended the crisis. Again, I was hired in 1985. We organized the first pilot in 87. The Solid Waste Advisory Committee committed to reach 40% recycling by the year 2000. The resistance to recycling was intense, so intense that the state had to levy a $1 million a day fine on the city. And that forced us to actually plan our recycling program in 1991. By 94, we had citywide every other week for only newspapers and glass. In 95, we added mixed paper collections. And in about 2000, we introduced single stream recycling. Keep going. Come on. There we go. Recycling sort of hit a crossroads as we entered 1995 to 2000. We had hit 7% recycling, and things just seemed to stagnate. We lost several recycling coordinators. One of the coordinators did an 80,000 household pilot. It was very successful, but there were no follow-up to that. That coordinator resigned, and we were left adrift at that point. There was a Philadelphia Recycling Alliance was formed. That was of the environmental groups with a commitment to get curbside recycling to everyone every week, at the same time as trash. Recycling coordinator was actually indicted in 2004, actually, and those charges were dismissed. The recycling office, we had a 23-person recycling office between 1995 and between 1985 and 1999. It was disabled, it was dismembered, completely phased out by 2007. However, there was a Recycle Now campaign in 2005. In 2007, Mayor Nutter, when he became mayor, committed to resource to recycling. And we went from 4% to 20% between 2010 and 2015. Then, as if to slide back again, we had China stop taking recycling. In 2016, we peaked at 20%. The pandemic hit in 2019. 2019, we deposited half of all our recyclables in the trash. This is all history we all are up to now, I do believe. And in 1920, ever so often, we disposed of recycling as trash. Where we are today is that recycling from 2016 to the present has declined from 20% to 8%. And that's where we stand right now. And we are at 7 minutes and 5 seconds, and I want a cookie.
Thank you so much, Maurice, for that informative presentation. I think it's really hard to believe that you've been around since 1950 working on this topic, because I must say it, you have such great skin. Maybe after this, you can share with us your
1970, not 1950.
1970. Okay, I was gonna say.
I'm already an old guy. That's enough, okay?
Maybe you can share your skincare routine with us at the end of that, huh? Is there a plastic for that? I would like to introduce our next speaker, Julie Hancher. Julie Hancher is the co-founder and editor of Green Philly, a local media company that makes sustainable living easy, accessible, and affordable. Since 2008, Green Philly has been the region's top source for sustainability news and events. Julie, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I was gonna say that was such a nice history lesson from Maurice, and I'm glad some things I even know about Ben Franklin, for example. And it's interesting because if I were to put a pin in his timeline, in 2008, I was working in the corporate world. And I one day learned that my employer was taking our recycling and throwing it into the trash. I was obviously meticulously recycling every day and had a separate recycling and trash bin at my desk, and was traumatized because this was Recyclegate 2008. And at that moment, just like Kyle said earlier, right, when I was like a child in 4th grade, there was someone who came to our school assembly and talked about how important it is to reduce, reuse, recycle. So that is certainly not a new phrase at all. But even when I saw my employer, like, throwing away our recycling, I really thought that, one, people didn't know how to recycle, and that, sustainability seemed hard and difficult, and there were a lot of disconnects in the environmental movement. So I started Green Philly as a passion project, has now evolved into a media company. So we talked a lot about recycling. And in 2014, Green Philly reported, another pin in Maurice's timeline, that Philadelphia increased recycling 155%. There were the Recycle Now, I think it was what's called the program, where people would get points for recycling. There was obviously a huge push by the city to do this. And just like Maurice had shared in the timeline, there were also some bumps, especially since 2018, when China announced a national sword policy, which basically what that means, to break that down a little bit more, is that China stopped accepting plastics and a lot of the things that we were sending overseas. Probably many people in this room now know that a lot of our products were shipped overseas. There's a lot of markets in the Philadelphia region, Northeast corridor, that they are taken to. But since 2018, in 2019, in May, the city basically, that's when they got the waste management contract. And since then, there have been on and off periods where the city announced, and during the pandemic, they were combining again. In November 2021, the streets department told the Philadelphia Inquirer that they were no longer combining trash and recycling. But people keep on reporting, and especially coming to us as Green Philly, to say that they're noticing the trash and recycling being combined. Ironically, at 6:15 this evening, when I was prepping for this call, I looked outside and the trash and recycling were being combined outside my house. So it's happening. And I think a lot of residents come to us because they're frustrated that they do not know when the city is combining trash and recycling. They want to do the right thing. And there's a lot of broken trust because they don't feel like they can understand or know that the recycling is being taken. And a lot of people come to me to be like, hey, how can we ensure stuff's being recycled? And if we think about the recycling and trash industry, that really dates back, once again, I put a timeline in Maurice's, another pin in Maurice's timeline. It started in 1960s when plastics were introduced. And especially like the 40s, 60s, basically what, 50, 70 years ago, when there were a lot of bottle bills and legislation that were trying to get industry to take back the materials as disposables were taken into to the market. 100 years ago, plastic didn't exist, right? But then it was shown as this really convenient way to consume goods, to take things home, whatever, right? There were like marketing campaigns with people with all these Tupperware and plastics, when inherently people reuse stuff. They didn't have a lot of trash. I think even in like the 90s, Maurice can correct me on this one, I think the city was composting like food scraps to pigs in New Jersey, possibly. I think that's a Nick Esposito thing he's told me. I may not get that 100% right, but I've definitely heard that story. So the plastics and the companies, Coca-Cola, major companies that we still know, basically started a greenwashing campaign to put bottling, to fight the bottling bills, to put the responsibility back onto consumers. So because it's a commodities market, there's a couple of problems with that. For one, aluminum is, for example, such a valuable product that can be recycled again and again. There's no limit to how many times that can be reused and repurposed into new aluminum. Glass, for example, can be also made into more glass again and again and again. Because it's heavy, oftentimes when it is recycled in our common streams, it's actually turned into road pavement and not actually recycled. However, plastic, in the 1960s, Americans consumed an average of 30 pounds of plastic. But now, in present day, it's something like 300 pounds of plastic per person per year. So that is a huge increase. And also, going back to plastic, only about 9% of the plastic that's ever been created has been recycled. You can't recycle plastic either. It's downcycled. So it goes down in quality material every time it is recycled. It has to be downcycled to park benches and other things. And it's now infiltrated everywhere from our seas to our skies. So I know I gave a little bit of a history lesson of the specifics of the actual products, but the reason for that, and the reason why in 2019, Green Philly actually said recycling is dead, for the record. Recycling isn't the solution, but it is a necessary piece. The problem is, there are so many other ways we can deal with our waste. Composting is a huge part of that. It's 40 to 50% of our consumer household waste tends to be food and things that can be composted. Things could be reduced or reused, just like the rounds on this call today, who are taking back your jars and stuff to be reused. And there are a lot of innovators, I think Remark Glass, shout out to them, who are taking back glass to repurpose things. So it's not necessarily that recycling is the only answer, but it has to be a bigger piece of this puzzle. And that's really the messaging that now Green Philly, and when people ask us for that, it's not about how to recycle better, but how do we make better choices as entrepreneurs and consumers to do the right thing. So I'm just about 7 minutes, so I'll turn it back.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. We'll now put the spotlight on Julie and both Maurice to be in conversation with each other about this topic.
Hey there, Julie. How are you doing?
Hey, Maurice, I'm great. How are you?
I am real good. I get all of understanding of what is going on really by reading your blog. I'm sure somebody's going to tell me that this is a commercial, but what needs to be said needs to be said. So just thank you for what you do there. One of the things that the question that I had wanted to ask you was, you've got your folks out in the street and talking to people. That sort of hearing what people are saying is really the measure, I think, of what is going on. I think those of us that sit where I do, that try and figure out how to make it work, and the people who are in the city who are trying to deliver the service, it really is about, how do people feel about what is going on? I'm just curious of what kind of messages you're hearing, most recently from people about recycling.
Mm-hmm. That is great. And I was going to say, I'm so flattered you said that, Maurice, because you're just the OG environmentalist in Philadelphia. So you and Judy Wicks just up there with the historical Philadelphia environmental scene. I would say, as far as what people come to us and talk about, are really their frustration because, the industry, as I mentioned, did a big greenwashing campaign years ago to really put the responsibility back on the consumers, and consumers feel that. I have a lot of environmental guilt. Probably people on the call are attending on a Thursday night because you might have some environmental guilt or want to do the right thing. But when you see your recycling and trash being combined and you're trying to do the right thing, or you can't buy something in bulk that you want to, and all of these things, it's a general frustration. And I think people just, want to do their part. And I think the unfortunate thing is, even though, kind of going back to this bigger picture, consumers are one piece of this puzzle and recycling is one piece, but it's really the bigger ecosystem of how that all comes together between companies and the cities and everyone else. What about you? What are you hearing?
Well, I take the notion from my neighbors, and being a trash nerd, I look in every trash container that I pass by, much to my children's chagrin. And when I hear from my neighbors, last night I got a notice from a neighbor saying that he got a $50 fine, being told that he was putting his recycling mixed with his trash. And I'm actually going to go to that administrative hearing with him because I don't understand the regulation. I understand that if you don't put your recyclables out, you're going to be fined. But I guarantee you, all of us have got some recycling in our trash, no matter how well we do, because we don't necessarily put everything in there. So I'm confused about that. I will say something that I had wanted to just show a quick slide. I'm going to share my screen for just a second, because there's something here I wanted to show in terms of where recycling is relative to the recycling loop. This is from the film, The Story of Plastics, okay? And you see right here in this corner where it says zero waste collection. Recycling is what makes the system from linear to the loop. If there is no recycling, there can be no closed loop. There can be no recovery industries because they've got to get their materials from what is recovered. So recycling is only a piece of the puzzle, but it's a critical one. If we keep throwing things away, we don't create the materials that are needed for companies that want to make it from materials that are collected. And that's where the criticalness of recycling is about. It's not everything, but it's that part that we all have to do in addition to buying less, not buying at all. It's It's called reduce, reuse, refuse.
Mm.
You know, and zero waste means rethinking how we look at waste and how we handle waste. Zero accidents doesn't mean there are no accidents. It means that we're working to make sure there's no accidents. Zero waste doesn't mean there is no waste. It means that we are looking to act in ways that don't create waste. And when we do that, everything changes. One thing I take issue with you, Julie, and I get in this argument all the time, I actually think it's all on the consumer. I think that people sell what we buy. I think too often we don't look at the package, we're buying the product, and we don't realize the product we want is packaged in something that we don't want. And I think that that's something I'm going to leave at that as a food for thought.
Do you want me to respond?
Certainly. I should
Yeah,
hope so.
I think this is kind of the ongoing debate in the environmental community, because like as consumers, we have the power to make decisions. And obviously in Philadelphia, there's so many great organizations and businesses popping up. Just I was working on WeWork today, and Raise Reusable, this small mobile truck, just opened up a storefront in Northern Liberties to promote somewhere where people can go and buy stuff in bulk. Go Buy Supply in South Philly, same thing, right? Like I remember years ago dreaming about a zero waste shop in Philadelphia. Now there's two, which is amazing. But at the same point, there are so many things that if we go back to the industry and how things have evolved, having a local market and shopping locally is totally the best option. But even so, with like FDA and other stuff, I know we just had a virtual symposium a couple weeks ago, and Manoush, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his last name, from Tiffin, who started the reusable container program for Tiffin to Go, which basically you can go get reusable containers and, then bring your food them back after you eat, you can take out. And that's like the perfect vision of the circular economy. Due to a regulation from, I think it's the city of Philadelphia, or I don't know exactly if it's like health department, he couldn't use glass, even though he wanted to, for those containers. So you have these, entrepreneurs, people who are business leaders that are trying to do the right thing, but there are so many constraints. And in order, it's not just like one piece of the system, but it's just like, even if you're trying to do the right thing, like there's still a plastic container he's using ultimately. So I think that's the balance. And as a consumer, I mean, for me, although I'll say this on a call that's being recorded, I recycle as much as I can, but I know that some things that I consume can't be recycled and I throw it in the trash. And I feel less guilty knowing, I use rabbit recycling, Matt has the receipts, but, like I think composting is more valuable than recycling. And I think like having other people think about like not buying stuff in the first place and all these other pieces, because there has been just such a shift on the consumer that if you can make the best decisions you make, making better decisions and like trying to put your actions towards things that I think will be bigger, moving the needle towards climate change is just my philosophy I've adopted since starting from a trash and recycling website.
Let me just offer this and then give a transition to our three speakers to follow. If we composted everything, we'd still have 70% of the waste left. If we recycled everything we could recycle, we would still have 75% of the trash left. If we recycle everything we recycle and compost everything we can compost, we're going to hit somewhere between 80 and 90%. The rest is about behavior in terms of what it is that we do. It isn't a matter of doing one or the other, or one or the other is more important. We got to do them all. We've got to do them all well in order to make sure there is no trash, that there's materials to make new things to. Mm-hmm. I think that where we are right now is we are struggling with the city's program. We are talking about hitting zero waste by 2035. And right now we are technically behind. We've actually gone down and not up. So we're not on our way there. What I think is interesting is that what I have watched in the last 5 years is an explosion on the consumer level of people saying, I want to have this way of living. And what I'm watching is entrepreneurs answer that call by offering their services, and it's growing. If the city were to offer citywide composting, they'd be putting Bennett Compost out of business. I guarantee you that would be an issue, that we are more likely to see some combination of private composting because of his work. And the three companies that are going to speak after us, I think they offer us an alternative. And that if we as consumers use those alternatives and don't go to supermarkets, in the same way all the supermarkets would tell you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we'll never put organics in because no one will buy them. There are organics in every store. Why? Because everybody is buying them. The marketplace responds to the consumer, and our entrepreneurs are leading the way. It's always been the small entrepreneur that leads the change. That has always been true, and it is happening now. I am more excited now than all the time I've been involved, despite how difficult everything is, because everything we need to make it happen is happening now. And with that, I suggest we really get down to business, because I think what these companies have to offer, for those of us that want to pay for it, and I'm sure in the questions, we'll bring up what the issue is in that, but I think we should hear from them and learn about what these wonderful options are. And Julie, this is great. We should do it again, okay?
Thank you. Thank you, both Julie and Maurice.
Maurice.
Yes, everyone, please feel free to send your questions over to the chat. Julie and Maurice will come back at the end of this presentation during our Q&A to answer your questions. Now that we've learned a little bit more about what the trash situation is here in Philly, we're going to transition to introducing our panelists, who are business leaders who are doing something about this problem. Elaine, can you move to the next slide, please? I have the pleasure of introducing Evan Abel. Evan is the head of service and design at The Rounds, a zero waste delivery and refill service for your everyday essentials. Evan, thank you for being here. Elaine, can you please start the video?
Little decisions that you make every day can make a difference. When you and your neighbors do it and the entire city does it, it can make a big difference. Imagine if we all get our hand soap and our toilet paper and our household personal care pantry staples delivered to us on the same day at the same time with no boxes. In theory, that could work, right?
Hey, there you go.
Thank you so much.
So The Rounds is a zero waste refill and delivery service for the stuff you use every day. We literally make the rounds. So we drop off everything in reusable containers.
Dog treats.
We pick up your empties to put those back into the system with zero waste and in a much more sustainable way.
It's a no-brainer to me. I was really looking for a way to reduce waste while still getting the convenience and the products that I need. I was actually a milk delivery person myself in high school, so I was really excited to sign up and see that it was a sustainable alternative. They kind of learn how often I'm ordering these products, and so every week my order gets smarter. It feels great to know that I'm not, polluting the streets and really helping or.
Oh, sorry about that, everyone. Let me share my screen again.
Sanitation workers any way we can, and
Rob,
helping.
can you see this?
Anybody in the city of Philadelphia can sign up for The Rounds. We are expanding our radius as fast as possible. Ultimately, we think this can be very successful in every city in the US. It does feel to me like this is why I was put on this earth, is to build a startup like this. Despite putting in the long days, you go to bed, you sleep, you know that you're making a difference, and it feels great.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having us. Excited to talk more afterwards.
Yes, thank you, Evan. Elaine, can you please move to the next slide? And everyone, please enter your questions for Evan, Tim, and Matt as we introduce them. They'll answer all your questions after the introductions are done. This is Tim Bennett. Tim is the founder of Bennett Compost, a company that collects food scraps from over thousands of households throughout Philadelphia for composting. These actions have kept a whopping 2 million pounds of food from landfills in 2021. Elaine, can you please play the video?
Oh, just one moment.
Take your time. Hi, Tim, how you doing? I think you might be muted.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
We're excited to have you here. Thank you.
I am Jen Mastelers.
I am Tim Bennett, and this is Bennett Compost. Our business picks up food scraps from over 5,000 households and 50 businesses throughout Philadelphia and turns those food scraps into a nutrient-rich soil amendment called compost.
We also make other soil products with that compost. We make a potting mix and we make vermicompost from our worms here.
Bennett Compost was founded in 2009. Some key milestones that we've had since that time, reaching 2,000 customers by bike, and even picking up any customers by bike, which we didn't do in the beginning. Being able to offer benefits, including health insurance and retirement, to our employees.
I think a big one recently is moving to the site that we're in right now. This is a partnership with the City of Philadelphia that began last fall. And we're really excited to see how it progresses.
So a circular economy is an economy that doesn't view things as waste. It views things as resources that can be constantly reused and repurposed rather than being thrown away and discarded. Bennett Compost is a key part of that because we're taking something that in modern times have thought of as a waste product, is our old food, and we're taking that and making it into a nutrient-rich soil amendment which can be used to grow more food. And so then that old food, when it's done, can be made again into compost and made to grow more food. And so rather than waste being created, this circle just continues of old food becoming new food, and that cycle continuing in a circular fashion.
One of our short-term goals is a permit to do the scale of composting that we are doing within the city, and that is one of the reasons why we're here and working with the City of Philadelphia, is to get that permit created. So hopefully there will be more of these sites located around Philadelphia.
Additionally, I think we have goals around making composting as accessible as possible. So part of our mission has always been to make composting easy, which is why we do a curbside pickup, and which is why we've tried to keep it as affordable as possible and significantly more affordable than comparable services in other major US cities. But continue to kind of innovate around how do we get even more people involved and how do we get even more people composting and how do we make sure that composting is something that everyone can do. We're very proud that we service the entire city of Philadelphia in terms of where we can pick up from, but how do we get more people in all the parts of Philadelphia composting? So the way we make composting simple is making it just as easy as throwing the material away. Because we don't really want to make people have to do more work to do the right thing. So we provide a container and people can put the compostable material in. We pick it up from their house in the same way their trash or recycling is picked up, with the goal again to just make it so you're not really having to do anything different, but just put it in a separate container. And we believe that if we do that, then we can get as many people on board with doing it by not making it too difficult for them.
I think most people know us, they know our buckets, they see them out on the street, and they know us as an organics collection company. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we make a really great end product with those organics and a really great potting soil, really great soil amendment with our compost.
I think one thing that people should know about us is that while we are definitely committed to composting and making great soil products, we're also committed to kind of building a business in the way that we think is important. And so that means kind of living out our values in terms of paying living wages, offering benefits, treating our employees with respect, and kind of making sure that it's really a kind of environment where people feel appreciated and where they want to work and where people don't feel taken advantage of.
You can find Bennett Compost at bennettcompost.com and on Instagram at Bennett Compost.
Or you can come visit us at 5650 Rising Sun Avenue and come get some compost for yourself.
Thank you for being here tonight, Tim. Can you move to the next slide, Elaine? Last but certainly not least, we have Matthew Seifried. Matt is the co-founder of Rabbit Recycling, whose mission is to empower people to be better stewards of the earth by providing a convenient solution for households and businesses to recycle, reuse, and upcycle. One thing that's guaranteed when your recycling goes to Rabbit is that none of it ends up in a landfill or an incinerator. Elaine, can you please start the video? And Matt can give us a description of his business.
Sure. So Like the video said, but a little bit choppy, we are a service for households and businesses to reduce waste. Simply put, we're trying to find solutions for materials that end up in landfills. We accept materials that the city takes, but we also accept harder recycled material. A lot of material that ends up in landfills, frankly, is because of contamination. Our model for collecting materials is a lot different than the city or how a municipality generally runs. So we're collecting a customer's material, we're individually sorting it. We are not combining things with bulk collection. And it is a way that we can identify if there's anything contaminated. We aren't bringing it into a system and ruining the whole batch. So from there on, we have sorting stations. We've found solutions for all the material we accept, and we are transparent with our customers where things go. So if you give us material, you can just reach out and ask us where it goes, and we'll tell you exactly where it is.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a question for all of you. Can each of you maybe speak on the importance of public and private partnership in achieving your goals as a sustainable business? What sort of challenges do you run into on the municipal level?
Well, I can go first unless one of the other panelists wants to go. I mean, we are currently working on two partnerships with the city of Philadelphia right now. One to compost food scraps that are being produced in their rec centers, and another one to work with food scraps that are being produced at the Philadelphia prisons. And I think, you know, there is a challenge in working with the city in that it is, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, you're used to kind of being able to move quickly and respond to the marketplace. And sometimes when you're working with these big municipalities, there's certain things that have to go, processes that things have to go through, and certain bureaucracies. But it also opens up new avenues to reach people who you might not otherwise be reaching with what you're doing. So I think there are both positives and negatives to both. And we've been excited about what we've done so far. And we think that continue to refine those models and expanded them to other things besides food scraps, you know, like hard to recycle plastics and other items, is kind of more ways that the city can kind of work things on a with entrepreneurs on a small scale to demonstrate that they can be done and that things can be scaled up, and that they can reach groups that the entrepreneurs and the business themselves might not be reaching for a wide variety of reasons.
Thanks, Tim. I think for the rounds, as a zero waste refill and delivery service, we probably rely less on public partnerships. But what we will be doing is relying more on companies like Rabbit and Bennett to partner and work on those parts that are tricky. So things like composting and recycling might be more commonplace in Philadelphia. Some of our other markets, it's really far from commonplace. And so there, we really need to lean into those partners to help bridge that gap. But to answer the question directly, I think we kind of thread that needle and won't have as much of a reliance on the public partnership.
Yeah, I agree with Evan. I think what we're turning to now is trying to keep things in a circular way with the local businesses. We're finding that it's a lot easier to work in that way as opposed to relying on the city. There's a lot of tendencies for us to feel like we're just want to get down to work and get things done, and sometimes this barking dog, sorry. The city has a lot of residents, has a lot of material to pick up. I really think the big thing that would be nice is for them to just continue to educate the public that can't afford our services, to continue to teach them how to reduce contamination, because I think the big problem is we haven't been educated in recycling since grade school. You learn it once and you're pretty much told word of mouth what to do for the rest of the time. So I think the incentive to teach about contamination can really reduce waste, and we can basically work in tandem without having to necessarily partner in a way that way.
Thank you. I think contamination in recycling or in compost. And I'm not quite sure about the rounds, if you require your customers to clean their jars or their products before they return to you. That can really pose a problem within your business, of course. My question for you, Tim, is what belongs in compost? What items can contaminate a compost bin, and what do you do with those items once you learn that they're not able to be composted or used?
Yeah, so what can be tricky for people sometimes is what you can compost in your backyard is different from what Bennett Compost might be able to compost, which is different from what an industrial composter that's doing municipal collections in San Francisco might be able to compost. And that is where sometimes the confusion can come from. In general, what we do is that we accept food scraps for composting, and we accept other kind of what we call organic waste. So that was stuff that was living at one time. And the kind of contaminations that we do see from time to time, we see some plastics, and we see occasional, utensils like forks and knives, believe it or not. And we see a lot of believe the biggest thing we see is the stickers on fruit peels, which actually don't often break down, and we'll go through the entire composting process and show through in the end. We try to do a lot of education around that because we are collecting it from our commercial customers in our households, and we can look in the container and see what it is. We have software that allows our collectors to make a note if they see something that's not supposed to be in there, and we try to reach out to the user and let them know that, hey, you didn't you put something there that we can't accept, and here's why we can't. And for us, because people who are using our service, they want to compost, they want to do things the right way, so they are often very receptive to that kind of feedback. And usually it's if they're making a mistake, it's because we've not done as much education as we should have. And so a big part of our job is constantly educating everyone we're working with about what can be composted with us, and other ways that they can compost if they're not going to compost with us.
Yes, I think you speak on a big problem, Tim. One of the questions from our audience is that one of the issues we have is that we're often preaching to the converted, people who are already familiar with these practices and want to do better. Do you have any thoughts on how to bring more people into the fold? How do you reach those consumers who might not get the message? And this question can be answered by each of you.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one first. So the rounds is really focused, and we're building towards it. We're obviously still, an early phase startup, but building towards an inclusive product line. And what I mean by that is we're very well aware that a lot of our early adopters are very green-minded. They're already doing this. Maybe we're making it easier for them. It's in one place. It comes in a reusable container. But what we're really trying to do is have an inclusive product line that kind of addresses everybody's needs and helps nudge them towards making greener decisions. So we know, we offer both regular toilet paper and recycled toilet paper. We know some people find that itchy, and that's okay. You don't need to not be a Rounds member because of that. You can, kind of have your selection, but maybe you're going to also find that, you've been exposed to toothpaste tablets that come in a metal container that can be recycled or reused. And so again, it's about this inclusive design that we can bring everybody on board and then help nudge them towards making greener decisions.
Yeah, I think for the people that aren't as sustainably driven, and it's frustrating for a lot of the people maybe on the Zoom call when you walk down the street and you think about all the hard work you do with your recyclables, and you wash them, you do everything, and then you see what somebody has in theirs or what someone might have dropped in, and it feels pretty hopeless. And I would say, we provide an alternate to the city, but it is a tough job. And sometimes I can understand when a worker is trying to decide between one bag, whether it's recyclable or whether it's trash. And as well as everyone does on this call, there are many people that will toss everything in, and it's a judgment call when there's thousands of bags to pick up. So there are many problems, but I want people to understand that the call, like you said, we are really preaching to the choir, and education, even as simple as styrofoam. I mean, that's a big one that the city does not accept it, but the city has a few drop-off places sponsored by a company called DART. So if they were able to promote some of those things to the people that might not be interested in our service, because whether it's the price or because they aren't typically interested in recycling at a higher level, they can at least see that the city has solutions that simply they might not be promoting for one reason or another. Maybe it's just because of breakdown of that partnership with a DART, but it's a perfect example. It's a place that takes number 6 plastics and polystyrene, and it's really just it's something I see in the recyclable number blue, the blue containers all the time. And people don't know. And it's really the part of it contaminating and just re-educating the public in some way, because we aren't going to be able to reach out to the people that don't want to use our service. So it's up to the city to really kind of drive home alternate solutions that they actually provide and the public probably doesn't even know.
Right. Because building the perfect circular item, how much can that matter unless there's policy to enable these things and to maintain its value and to push it forward? Another question that we have that's directly for you, Kyle, is that since the rounds recently expanded to Miami, what challenges or opportunities have you seen in Philly, versus these other cities?
Sorry, is that for me? For the rounds expanding to Miami?
Yes.
What opportunities have we seen in Philly since then? Sorry, is that?
Opportunities or challenges? Are there challenges solely that you see in Philadelphia that don't really occur in other cities like Miami?
Sure, yeah, so it's really interesting. So we really, we're in a learning phase. Each of our cities, Philadelphia, DC, Miami, are very distinct from each other. We've been learning things in every step. And so one early learning we found in Miami is a lot of our members are asking for composting. They're just curious. It's not something we've ever dealt with. And Bennett, I'm sure we'll be chatting soon as we look to expand, but we're going to be running a pilot in Miami, collecting compost and working with a local provider there to just, run that reverse logistics. So challenges in Philly, I think there's, fewer kind of bigger buildings, so the density is a little bit different. But again, we just kind of adapt our model in each city. So yeah, and I think that's like the beauty of our business right now, is we can really adapt to each market.
Thank you, and excuse me, your label says Evan Abel, not Kyle.
No worries.
All right. So I would like to invite, put the spotlight on our 2 speakers, Julie and Maurice, to join us here. Please feel free to answer this question. Why is a waste problem not just a problem in Philadelphia, but the world? Can you expand on this for our audience?
Well, the world is linear. I mean, the model for buying our products is that it comes from some raw resource. It's produced, it's manufactured, and it's sold. And the whole supply network chain is designed that way. It has it's like an open pipe with the pollution going out the other end. When you finish it, just toss it. There is no responsibility for those people that manufacture products to be responsible for what happens at the end of the life of the product. Now, there's a whole movement afoot, environmental extended product responsibility, to change all of that, to make the people who produce the products be responsible for what comes out the other end. But these companies will tell you, and believe me, over the years I've heard them, they will say, it's not my responsibility. That's what your job is as a municipal official. Your job is to take care of the trash. They don't say it this way, but their job is to make it, and your job is to handle it. And they've been almost just that kind of crass, as I've talked to them, in the past. But that's the nature of the system. The whole concept that we're going to close the loop is about changing that dynamic. That is where we are right now.
Julie, you spoke on a really interesting topic. It kind of struck a chord with a lot of the audience and brought a discussion to the chat. A lot of people deal with consumer guilt. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with this statistic or if you can verify if it's true, but it essentially says that 90% of greenhouse gas emissions were produced by 10 companies. I'm not sure if you've come across this statistic, if you can speak more about it and its validity.
That is, so I believe it's about 70% of our greenhouse gases by 100 companies, and that is primarily fossil fuel. So relating to this conversation, as Kyle mentioned earlier, plastics are a petroleum product. And a lot of people are thinking about how to get away from gas. I mean, prices aside, that's a very complex issue in itself. You know, gas companies have seen the writing on the wall, even though they denied and purposely misled the public about knowing about climate change and greenhouse gases since the 80s or 70s, since I think the Reagan era. I can't remember. My history is losing me right now, but they basically are like trying to produce more plastic. And that's the interesting dilemma as we're talking about recycling, because recycling is like one of those products that cannot be recycled, it has to be downcycled. And if we're thinking about the overall, how this affects our emissions, one, I mean, just think about like the different types of recycling. So people are like, how do I recycle this product? I'm sure Matt could probably speak to this too. Like, there are so many different numbers of plastic, so many different forms. The bioplastics can cause problems because they can't really, some can't be recycled or composted unless in commercial facilities. And there's just like so many complications that it's not just like a yes, no, recycle, don't. It's just like it has turned into such a bigger issue.
Yes. Maurice, maybe you can answer this question from our audience. What are the most common barriers in implementing waste diversion programs on the local level? What challenges have you seen, particularly with Philadelphia?
Well, it would be two-pronged. One is you can only recycle that for which there are markets for. So the only materials that they want to collect are those materials that someone wants to buy to make it to something new. If you collect an item just because you think it's recyclable, but there's no market, it's called trash. It's very expensive trash because now you've collected it separately, but you're going to throw it away because there is no place for it to go. The other side of that has to do with what the municipal resources and will is to make it happen. So there is do we want to do this? If we want to do this, will the taxpayers be willing to pay to get this done? And so both of those things come into play. You know, I really think that it's a private public sector model. You know, I think that there are those of us who want a higher level and we're willing to pay for it. And then there are the others who need to do it because it needs to be done. And there's a dichotomy in that because we can't all afford to pay for it. And I saw something in the chat that said, well, can I like get reimbursed from the city if I use one of these other services? The problem is if we do that, what it means is somebody else who can't buy it is going to be deprived. And the truth of the matter is, and I think this is just a fact that no one has really taken into account, we aren't paying the real cost to get rid of trash. We're not doing the right things we need to do. We're not taking care of the workers. You know, we are expecting something without knowing even what it costs. And there is a lack of transparency in the way that city works that we can't even know about those things, that we are not told and they are not shown to us. In fact, they are kept from us. And until we grapple with that and understand, we need to look at the whole waste picture, how we recycle it, how we compost, how we get rid of it. It is not a separate thing. They're all things. How are we handling the materials that we are producing at the curb? How are they being handled? And until we do that, until we look at the whole picture and we get real with the cost, we're never going to get there. And in the end, it's going to have to be handled by a public and a private kind of relationship. That, by the way, is the way recycling started in the 80s. It was not environmentalists that brought on recycling. It was the industry who wanted the materials because it was an energy crisis and it was cheaper to make new products from used stuff. This whole thing was, I was trained by industry people. In fact, environmentalists wanted bottle bills and didn't think recycling would work because they didn't believe people would do any separation at the curb. I was there, and that was the dialogue that was given. So we really have to step back and look at the whole picture and get all the information. We can do this, but we need to have all the information. And it's going to happen anyway, because with companies like the three that are here, they see opportunities. Why? Because people want it. They want it enough that they're willing to pay for it. Because they're willing to pay for it, Businesses are going to evolve to make that happen. If enough of it happens, it's not going to be sold. We're going to see less waste because there's going to be less of a demand for the packaging. I'll say it again. When we buy our products, we're not thinking about the packaging. We're only buying the products without looking at how they're packaged. And once we start to do that, then we're going to go to companies like the Rounds and say, sell me the product and not the package. And that's what the Rounds does.
Thank you. What it really sounds like you're saying is that the designs just need to be circular from start to beginning. They shouldn't produce waste. At the end product shouldn't, at least. Evan, can you speak more about the design process at the Rounds in your, please? Thank you.
For sure. And first, just to second everything Maurice said, from this being a systems level problem to having to equate the externalities, so not thinking about the packaging, the cost of that on our entire system is a big miss. I do hope that things like EPR and bottle bills help kind of fill those gaps, but I agree this is a big systems level problem. So more specifically for the Rounds on our design process, we think very much like Maurice was just saying, you're trying to buy pasta. The container that it comes in or how it gets to you is not the point, right? Those are things that you are often not considering. And so people are going on to these 10-minute delivery services. They're clicking buy. Some poor soul has to come out in the rain and risk their life. There's all these other implications and problems. It's certainly not efficient, and then it comes in packaging, and it's pretty much a miss on everything other than you got it in 10 minutes. And so the Rounds, we really try to take a step back and think about what is the goal. The goal is that you have something that you're not super excited to select in the supermarket. You want pasta, you want toilet paper. These are more of the mundane items. They're your household essentials. And the thing that you want is that it's in your house and you don't have to think about it. And so that's what we provide. And we do that in the most efficient way. So we group all the deliveries or refills, as we call them, on a certain day. So you and your neighbors get delivery on the same day. That creates an efficient system, low in carbon, low on cost. And then it comes in a reusable package that we pick up on the next time. And so we're also constantly evolving our work on the packaging. And so we have a big project going out now that hopefully we'll have some more information on soon about really kind of redoing that packaging, eliminating some of the few products that we have in their original packaging from our line and replacing those with new options. And so really just thinking of that as an entire service to the user.
Thank you. I know that Rabbit Recycling also collects a multitude of jars and containers that you either upcycle or donate, or you're in collaboration with other businesses to collect those items. What would you say is the issue, like the biggest issue that you see when attempting to send these glass containers or these plastic containers that you receive from your customers? What's the biggest issue you see when attempting to upcycle these items?
This is a question for Rabbit, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. So big thing is contamination. I always go back to that. It's what's in the bottle, what's in plastic. These machines that are able to shred, they're able to break the glass down. These things, you put too much stuff in these and you're really going to start messing up the system. So cleanliness is the big thing. But the other thing is reaching out to, we have a community of artists that will take things and make them into creative pieces, sculptures, models that, become something that is diverted out of landfill and isn't going through the process of the recycling. So, we do focus on the recycling part because we're trying to find solutions for materials that exist. There can be bans, there can be policies that prevent certain materials in certain areas, but we know that the stuff's going to exist anyway. So the solutions are out there, and it's up to companies like ours, companies like Rounds, they're trying to find reduced packaging. And with Bennett, where we're just trying to keep everything circular and local, you're really coming up with a way that we can keep things, in a much more horizontal or a vertical way as far as horizontal shipping things out, sending things out. So we're really trying to focus on actually keeping materials that we know we're the last line of defense. So if it goes out and we send it out to a place that's not clean, we're no longer going to have that relationship with them. So it's up to us, teach our customers, hey, this is hard. It's a higher level recycling. It's not easy. It takes cleaning. It takes, getting your hands in a bottle and cleaning it, shaking it. But we provide videos. We want to teach our customers that there are ways and solutions to reduce what, like they said, 10% of what actually gets recycled is the number, 8% that actually goes in, actually gets recycled. So when you find communities of ours that are able to turn things into stuff, when you find local businesses like Bottle Underground that's able to take glass and resell it and reprocess, or just in a remarket way, I mean, you're really dealing with a local circular economy. And that's sort of the goal, I think, for most of the people here. How do we keep it as local as possible?
Thank you, Matt. Elaine, if we can spotlight Kyle Lewis. We have a couple of minutes. Our audience has a few questions directed towards Kyle that
Okay.
we have time to answer.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, I added Kyle Lewis as spotlight.
Thank you. Hi, Kyle.
You're
Oh,
muted.
I need to unmute her.
Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself.
It's all right.
I don't have the fastest fingers, but I was trying to answer some of the questions in the chat, but I'm happy to take more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I say one thing though before I do?
Sure.
I do appreciate what Tim mentioned about the socioeconomic realities of the city of Philadelphia. I think that when we're looking at messaging people in the city, if we're messaging kind of a higher economic realm, we can kind of give one message. But if we're looking at messaging the whole city, we really have to look at the responsibility behind our words. So when we're saying like, don't do this or don't do that, it's not necessarily that everybody can afford, right, to do these alternatives. And so that's where I'm coming from when I am talking with anybody in the city of Philadelphia. So I appreciate Tim bringing that up, and I do want to take your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Our question is from Nisha. Are the materials sent to the city's single stream recycling actually getting recycled? And you answered this question right now, but is the solution to drop things off to avoid commingling with trash, or to use companies like Rabbit Recycling? A lot of people have the same question as to why is their recycling being commingled with trash? And is this because consumers are because of contamination, or is the city being told to do, or are city workers being told to do this?
So the commingling with trash was happening during COVID. If you are seeing commingling of trash now, it should not be happening. And so I've put into the chat to please email me at recyclingoffice@phila.gov. You can also call 311 and we'll get the report. But if you email me, then I can get it, and I can get it to our operations folks and investigate it. I know several of you within the chat, and again, I was monitoring it, were saying that you've seen trash and recycling go in. If you see that, my thought is that the best thing to do for the environment, right, is to let me know, because then I can let our operations team know. I have people who have said, I've charted for 16 weeks videos of it. And I'm like, well, okay, you might chart that for 16 weeks, and that might be true. But what I think is actually best for the environment is to let somebody know, and then we can change the behavior. I've gotten 2 emails this week from people who last week told me that they did see their materials commingled. And then this week, they told me that they saw the difference. And so please know that when you see that in the city, 1, it should not be happening. 2, it is not happening everywhere. 3, I saw somebody in the chat pop up about that 8% of Philadelphia materials are getting recycled. That is not our statistic. I don't know who said that, but that is not our statistic. Our materials are getting recycled about 23 to 25%, and sometimes it goes as high as 27%. Our material is residuals, which is trash in the recycling stream. So that's obviously not getting recycled, but the other materials are going out to market and being sold.
Kyle, I was the one that came up with that figure. The distinction here between contamination, it's 8% of all the materials that are collected as trash or what is being recycled now. This is
I think that's a national stat.
No,
that's
no,
not
no, that's the city's numbers. That's based on the data that you have collected on what you've recycled and on what you've disposed. That is a number that actually I got from the recycling office.
You're looking at the last diversion map?
I am looking at the numbers that are reported by the city to the state of how much trash is recycled and how much material is recycled. You add the two together, you do a division, you get 8% of that material is recycled. They're your numbers, and I can show them to you.
Yeah, there were definitely some timeline issues and questions that I had. So there are some, those are definitely some numbers that we should discuss.
Well, and I will, they're your numbers, so I'll give them back to you and you can do the math. You know, we did the same math we had 20% before, okay? It's the same math we've used all the time. I can give those to you. They're your numbers.
So we can certainly have that conversation.
Another question for you, Kyle, is what steps are the city taking to educate residents on proper recycling in order to avoid this contamination issue?
So we do a number of things. You heard me, I think, early in the conversation mention a video. We have distributed that, and we look to groups like this. I am happy to supply our information, our palm cards, our door hangers. We have some posters. We have a slew of information on our website that can be for distribution or that is for distribution. We have social media toolkits on our website as well. We do door-to-door as resources allow, and we'll be actually doing some door-to-door this spring and doing some bin tagging before the trucks get there. Somebody mentioned in the chat that the city that they were in, the crews tagged the bins. That may have happened. I don't know if that was a municipal collection or not, but municipal collections generally do not have time to tag bins as they are, or let me say that the city of Philadelphia doesn't have time to tag bins as they are collecting materials. Otherwise, that would result in a tremendous amount of overtime. And so we do have sweep officers, our sidewalks and walkways, education and enforcement program officers that go out and do education. And again, we do have some bin tagging happening this season, and we have resources that are always available online. And if you email me at recyclingoffice@phila.gov, I can get you any information that you need. I read about some Boy Scout troops and some volunteer groups in the chat, again, trying to read quick and trying to talk fast to respect everybody's time. But we're happy to get you information for distribution because we want to get the message out just like you all do.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kyle. We really appreciate you being here tonight, along with everyone, the panelists, our speakers. Thank you. Julie and Maurice, I'll ask you if you have any closing comments before we move on to the next section.
I would just close by saying that the success for recycling in Philly really relies with all of us. I think that the streets department does the best job that it can with the resources that it has. And that for us to expect the recycling office and the streets department to solve all the problems is not only unrealistic, it's just not the way we deal with it. This is a problem of talking to our elected officials and making certain the department had the resources it needs, and there are limitations. And outside of those limitations, we have the private sector, which is growing to cover everything else. And we should not expect that the streets department is suddenly going to be able to do, for instance, what the rounds does. It's a whole different game. And we're going to have to do a mix of the two.
And I will say, I think a lot of the things have been said previously. For one, I think there's a lot that people can do on an individual level, shopping locally, especially farmers markets, supporting local businesses, not shopping on Amazon and getting things overnight shipped or 2-day shipping from Prime. I know our friends of the rounds here has a great slogan. I'm very excited about that. Bye bye Bezos. And I think just the more actions we can take is a super positive way to think of that. Also, Green Philly, we've been talking about recycling, trash, answering a lot of these questions, especially about where items go. So I'll also drop where to subscribe to our newsletter in the chat too, so you can learn more from us. And we also take a lot of questions. So thanks for having me, and appreciate hearing from everyone else too.
Thank you, Julie. All right, everyone. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Tonight has been really informative, not just for me, but I can't wait to share the information that I learned with my community and my friends. We'll follow up with resources on where you can find these organizations. Please drop any information about the organizations that you are involved with into the chat box, and we'll be able to send that all out. Up next, April 21st is our next event, and it's entitled Growing the Circular Reuse Models in Food Service and Grocery. You'll be hearing from Elisa Shargradotsky of Ecosystems. Ecosystems is a member-based local network of businesses, organizations, and private citizens in the Philly area intent upon eliminating single-use waste. You'll hear from Tiffin Cuisine, a local restaurant looking to curb their single-use waste by implementing a returnable container program. And last, you'll hear from Circular Philadelphia, which Julie happens to be a part of the board. Their goal is to drive growth of a thriving circular economy through advocacy and education. Please email us at wastereductionphil@gmail.com with any questions or comments about the event. And you can join us at the Plastic Reduction Task Force on Facebook. In the Philadelphia Neighborhood Networks, you can find us at www.phillynn.org. Elaine, can you stop recording, please?